let's talk about the chair company and masculinity and comedy. First, I will say, where's the question? I want to answer a question I just saw. So Tom, I'm going to talk about liberation theology a little bit in the next one. One of the reasons for the third video is so that I could get into liberation theology and the adjacent world of like Black theology in a more full-on way. So there you go. But for now, I want to talk about Tim Robinson, the Chair Company, and why dudes are like this. For those of you who haven't seen it, the Chair Company is a comedy series. It was on HBO Max, 8 episodes, just finished airing, starring Tim Robinson. He co-created the show and co-wrote it with some of the same folks that work on I Think You Should Leave and the movie Friendship. It's a lot. It's one of those things where, like, you know, if you're not into his thing, it might not be a show that you are into. It's a little bit full on. How do I go back to screen sharing? Oh my God. Why doesn't anything work the way I want it to? Why is everything bullshit? Why does everything suck? Hold on. Let's see if I can make this work. I clicked the wrong thing. There we go. So this is an article from a website I like called Defector. I will say it's kind of like an unspoilable thing because it's all just absurdity. But if you are hyper concerned about me accidentally saying a plot point from the show, that's fine. Maybe bounce or maybe come back in a second. The goal here isn't to review the show, but kind of to talk about the show in the context of masculinity. And I think this article gets it in some interesting ways. So the male comedians are going through something. It's hard out there for the fellas. It is hard out there for the fellas, in case you did not know. This time, I'm not referring to the obvious ones who have lost their minds through some excess of steroid abuse and podcast appearances. I'm talking about the more thoughtful class of male comedy. Nathan Fielder, John Mulaney, Gerard Carmichael, Bo Burnham. Yeah, I mean, I think when we look at comedy these days, I think there's so much discussion about the weird Austin guys and the Joe Rogan guys and dudes who have taken comedy as a weapon in their like manosphere quest for domination. You know, basically like the Turning Point USA version of comedy. And in one side of the current comedy and culture landscape, you do have like Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan and Hinchcliffe, all these fucking guys. And they've attached themselves to conspiratorial views. They've attached themselves to state power, to military power, to Silicon Valley power, all that sort of stuff. And in many ways, those comedians and the cultural circles around them are meant to represent some type of masculinity or some masculine urge that has been repressed or something like that. But the much more interesting thing happening in comedy right now tends to be male comedians who are kind of like deconstructing masculinity or looking into deeper questions about why men are like this. It says Mulaney and Burnham have waded through this ordeal in their stand-up. Okay, we know those people are. But if there's one comedian who has most effectively tapped into the specific nihilistic angst that so many men below the age of 50 seem to be facing today, it might be Tim Robinson. And like one way we could put Robinson into perspective, you know, next to some of the other comedians who are more like bro-y is I think a lot of the bro-y comedians take a type of angst, nihilism, emptiness in the contemporary male psyche, and they look externally to, I guess, like blame an external force for that, one that makes them the specific victims of some external force. What Tim Robinson and people in this camp do, I think, is a lot more looking at the weird psychology and some of the psychological contradictions of men under what we could call late stage capitalism. And rather than pointing fingers at like DEI or whatever, it's both a looking inward and a looking at and sort of like looking at the bullshit of the world around us. But, you know, maybe we'll get into that a little bit here. Robinson has been lampooning a certain kind of disaffected, desperate, and totally awkward type of man for years on his Netflix sketch show, I Think You Should Leave. More recently, They made a movie called Friendship, and now they have a show called The Chair Company. It follows Ron Trosper. These guys are so good at coming up with names, and his family. He has the degrading fortune of being part of a company still trying to build malls in a country that has less and less use for them. I feel like that's kind of like a meta move that someone's still trying to build a physical mall in the world. The inciting incident of the whole show is that this guy sits on a chair and the chair breaks, and then he goes on a conspiracy hunt to find out why the chair broke and what's really going on. Um, this article talks about the show getting into like a 70s conspiracy psychological thriller thing. Um, though the show is impossible to predict in terms of plot developments, what remains consistent is how hapless Ron is at finding some deeper meaning and purpose in his life, much less in his investigation. And a huge theme of the show is this guy trying so desperately to find a thing to do in his life that will give it some sort of purpose beyond being good at job and like being dad or something like that. Because we see a person who is a suburban dad who seemingly has a good relationship with his wife who is nice, and he has two kids that are weird and cool, and he has a job. But we learn as part of the backstory at one point, he didn't have his job because he wanted to start a Jeep tours company that went poorly. But this longing for something else. And, there's a way to look at that longing for something else. And this is what we might see in more of like the Christian-y right-wing bro world. Like that the longing for something else means that we are owed something, that we should have something, that we should possess something, that we're men and we've got to be all men about it and stuff like that. I don't think that's necessarily what is happening in this show. This author goes on to say that, yeah, he finds the same appeal in his conspiracy that many cranks cherish, the ability to glamorize ordinary life and chalk its shortcomings up to the work of an unseen, powerful force. This is the thing I've talked about before. I talked about in the conspiracy theory video. I've talked about it in other places on the channel and on streams. Frederick Jameson, my guy, talks about conspiracy theory in a way where he's basically like, the conspiracy theorist is trying to do the right thing in a certain way. What they're trying to do is come up with like a totalizing aesthetic, a narrative or a system that explains precisely why the world sucks or doesn't make sense. It's the idea that there must be some unifying logic behind the seeming disunity of the world that we live in. Now, Jameson thinks that project of totalization is good. For him, the way we arrive at that sort of totalization is by a type of is more like Marxist dialectical theory, understand relations of capital. But that's why he'll say that the conspiracy theorist is doing like a poor man's version of cognitive mapping. And in a sense, that's what's happening in the show, right? In a show like this character is looking for some glamorous, exciting, sexy, dangerous thing that makes sense of it all. This says Ron's only desire is to validate his own life, which hasn't gone the way he originally hoped. And yeah, he tried to quit his job to start a Jeep tour company. And this is a familiar theme in all of Robinson's work, the tension between chasing your wildest dreams, no matter how silly they are, and the reality of daily domestic life and survival. The millennials are a generation stuck in the middle between the promises and excesses of the 20th century America and the techno dystopia being created right before our eyes. And I don't want to like exceptionalize any particular generation, but I do think there's something about the millennial mind where we started life pre 9/11, like we started life in a world where everything was possible and the economy was doing okay and the internet was booming and like everything was going to change. And then like 9/11 happens, and then 2008 happens, and things have been pretty shit since then. So we had like a foot in the old world and then a foot in this dystopian hell. And I think that especially older millennials and in the comedy and work we see produced by older millennials, we see the exploration of this tension and contradiction. It's what I experienced. I'm sure some of you do this as well with, people I know who are like, it's kind of weird. I have a pretty good job and I went to college and I did all the stuff and I'm in my late 30s, early 40s. And like, I can't buy a house. Now you might be saying like, well, boo hoo, most people can't buy houses. I get it. But when you grow up in a certain environment where it's like, oh yeah, you just like go to school and you go to college and you do job and you buy house. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that world doesn't exist anymore, even though it was the world we were raised for. Okay. I think that Robinson and a lot of work in this milieu is doing the same thing. I realize I've not put article links in the chat, so let me put this in the chat right now. And Defector in general publishes a lot of good stuff. It's an independent media company. I recommend reading it. It says most tellingly, Ron is doing better than most. He has a house, a family, a job, but it's the malaise, the feeling of being stuck, whether in a boring town or menial work, weighed down by responsibilities and unable to feed that core that yearns for more. Wow. There's something specific to what's going on with young men today that Robinson's show and comedy in general speaks to. And, with all the crisis of men stuff, I talked about this a little bit last week or 2 weeks ago in relation to the Alexander, what's his name? Alexander Galloway, whatever that guy is, Alexander Hamilton. But, I think there is a sort of masculinity crisis or a crisis of young men that's worth talking about and worth reflecting on seriously. And I think Robinson's work, among others, does that well. It says it's the neediness of it all. Robinson's characters tend to be devoid of purpose and value in a world that increasingly needs less from them. Their crack-ups are set in motion by their inability to find fulfillment in technological work that preys on insecurities and feeds them depression for every meal. Again, it's the exploration of that contradiction of looking for meaning and purpose in a world that specifically has less of both of those things, of trying to approach Scott Galloway, approach the work that we do with the sense of like, surely this must have meaning, and then finding out it doesn't have meaning. And I think that's like a big part of the psyche, especially of like the millennial male, that gets explored in the work of someone like Robinson. Like, what happens when the things that are supposed to be meaningful feel empty? What happens when things that are supposed to bring us joy and purpose still leave us feeling like shit? What's actually going on? And he says it's a human impulse to wander and search for meaning. Robin's characters show us how easy it is to get pinned down, not just by the demands of a capitalist system, but by the internet's ability to pick at our anxieties and feelings of inadequacy. If every day is just about going to work and then living our lives online, how is anyone supposed to function? And something that Robinson's work, and I think others, again, in this ilk get into, this is like a big Connor O'Malley thing, is how dystopian it really is when life is like, do bullshit job, if you're lucky enough to have bullshit job, and then participate in the ongoing product or the ongoing project of collective internet psychosis, where we increasingly trade our psyche, our attention, and our soul for the sake of creating profit for others while making ourselves more dependent on the thing that gives them profit, while sucking humanity out of our eyeballs from the back. Like, it's tough, and it's tough to abstract and think about what's really going on and what most of life really is. This guy says that one of his favorite, I think you should leave sketches, is the Darmine doggy door commercial, in which Robinson plays a pitchman for a doggy door company doing it. Okay, this one's good. Maybe we should watch it, and let's see if there's a good chance that maybe if we watch a Netflix video on here, it'll stop the stream. But this isn't monetized, so maybe this will work. Let's see. But I do think if you're not familiar with Robinson's work, I think this is a really good example of what's going on and why it is the way it is. So let's check this out.
Dog doors can be a problem. Your dog can get out, but other things can get in. The Darmine Doggy Door brings you the newest high-tech doggy door from Darmine Devices. These doors are fully automatic and activated by a digital chip in your dog's collar. You're not going to get varmint, you're not going to get intruders, and you're definitely not going to get this thing. Because I saw that thing. That thing came in here when I was on the couch.
It's a pig!
Pretty fucked up. We're going to get somewhere with this.
What the fuck? What the fuck? My next door neighbor had put a Richard Nixon mask on a pig and had it go through my doggy door because we've been arguing over a property line. Get it off of my bushes! He was trying to call me a liar and a thief like Nixon and a pig.
You're a pig!
But I didn't know what the fuck was happening because I've barely been sleeping since my wife got flipped upside down by a swing dancer at a wedding. He must have flipped my wife 8 times! And it really bothered me. When you can't sleep...
I just want to note that the malaise and the stress of his life is a dancer spun his wife around and the neighbor complained about the property line, like very mundane stuff, but this is what drives the fellas
When
crazy.
you see that thing, you're not just like right away, that's a pig with a mask. You're like, that's gonna kill me. That's real. That lives with us on Earth. I thought I was gonna get eaten. I'm not a stupid fucking idiot. I know it was just a pig, but for 50 seconds it felt really real. And when you think you're gonna get eaten and your first thought is, great, I don't have to go to work tomorrow.
That's the moment. Okay. I'm gonna play this little thing one more time. Because this is it. This is like the money shot. This is the juice of this whole thing.
When you think you're gonna get eaten and your first thought is, great, I don't have to go to work tomorrow.
When you think you're going to get eaten and your first thought is, great, I don't have to go to work tomorrow. The point of this sketch and much of what he's getting into here is that this horrible, scary thing happens. And it's honestly like, great, I don't have to go to work. That the working world and my working life is so terrible and miserable that the thought of getting eaten by a pig monster is actually good, you know? Because it's like the thing where sometimes this has probably happened to some of you where you might get like sick or like really sick or take time off work or school. And especially if you're in a situation where you have like paid sick leave or whatever, it's like good that you're sick because at least you get to not be at work. Like is that how we're living?
Tomorrow. You're relieved you don't have to go to work because you thought you were gonna get eaten? What the fuck is this world? What have they done to us?
I mean, that's it, guys. I mean, like really, like this is like it. This is it. There's like so much of like this is the thing right here.
You don't have to go to work because you thought you were gonna get eaten? What the fuck is this world? What have they done to us? What did they do to us? That was the most consequential day of my life because now I don't like my work. The Darmine doggy!
That was the most consequential day of my life because now I know that I don't like my work. But that's heavy, man. That's some heavy stuff. Like, what have they done to us? Why is it that people almost would rather? Why would they rather die than would not go to work? Why would you rather get eaten than go to work? Plenty of reviews of the Chair Company praise it for being the rare piece of Lynchian art that actually earns a designation. There is real artistic vision on display here, which would allow Robinson to play around with themes that feel so universal to 21st century life without becoming didactic or inert. You can watch it and think about all that ails millennials, but you can also just laugh at the bizarre twist and gaggle strange characters like the guy with a dent in his head who keeps dipping his elbow in a bowl of queso. Other than Nathan Fielder, there's nobody making TV that is this entertaining or more well-suited to the times. This makes you think of an article I saw the other day. Let me see if I can find it. I have like an archive link to it. I'm going to share a link with you guys, and it's something that if you want to check out, you can find. You might have to do some clicking around to get it without a paywall, but you're all really smart, and I know that you can do it. But, you know, I saw an article recently that was by Naomi Klein about surrealism and fascism and the way in which a lot of the art of early surrealism could be viewed as a direct reaction to fascism. I found it very compelling. And I think in a way, something that's interesting about the work of Robinson and people of that ilk is the surreality that they use to explore the kind of like exploitative, alienating, disorienting structure of contemporary capitalist life and things of that nature. So I would check that piece out by Klein if you find this stuff interesting at all. I do think that something that Robinson's work does very well is capturing the feeling that shit is off. And to do the Jameson thing again for a second, you know, like one of the things that Jameson's into is the aesthetic of cognitive mapping, the idea that there is a way in which the aesthetic in which art, literature, film can help us do that work of cognitive mapping of like seeing things. And in a sense, the more like conspiratorial impulse is sort of nothing makes sense, everything sucks, what's really going on? And I think like the more aesthetics of capitalism thing is it seems like everything is dumb and nothing makes sense. And it's because everything is dumb and nothing makes sense. And there's like a few small people benefiting off the whole thing. I think that Justin in the chat brought up the Portland protest frog. And I think that is a very good example of something like that, of utilizing absurdity or exploring absurdity and surrealism as a mechanism for figuring out what the hell is going on in our world right now. Yeah, I'd recommend watching The Chair Company if you haven't already. I think it's pretty good, but it's definitely a mileage may vary depending on the type of comedy that you find yourself drawn towards. Hey, thanks for watching this. In case you didn't know, I have a main channel where I post video essays and stuff like that. It's just called Michael Burns. There's a link. Would love for you to check that out. If you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon. You can also hit up either of my beverage partners. There's Yes Please Coffee, who make the best gosh darn coffee in the world. You get 15% off with the code Burns Beans. And of course, my beloved new non-alcoholic beer sponsor, Years Beers. It's really good. There's a link below, and if you use it, you get 10% off your first order. So thank you so much. And if you ever want to watch these streams live, I'm live every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific. Okay, now now it's really over. So now you can go. I'm going to finish this. Now it's over. I'll see you guys for the next one.